So let's get started. Welcome to you all to this panel where we will be joining you. My name is Leticia. I am from the Monterrey University, Mexico, and Candelaria Ferrara from Buenos Aires, from CLAIS, the Latin American Center for Service Learning. I would just like to remind you that the name of this panel is Service Learning as a Path to Spirituality, remembering that spirituality is a part of every human being because it is something broader than a religion. It is a more dynamic process through which people, human beings, find a purpose in life. Service to others is a means to that end, to live the sense of transcendence. So service learning helps us on our calling for education to come out from the classrooms, from reflections and theories that are important but not enough to show change. So service learning allows us to touch upon reality, feel it, perceive it together with other students, and from a concrete action to learn and to show and teach what is to love the others by implementing a solution and to be the life testimony of this from education. We will have a number of different experiences from Spain, Italy, Ecuador, the United States, Portugal, Chile. This will be live testimonies of what we can do in the classrooms in favor of social transformation and our community. Following me, Candelaria Ferrara will be talking about the rules for participating today. Go ahead, Candela. Thank you so much, Leticia. Welcome to this panel, to this round table. Let me talk about the organization in this time that we will share together. Each author will have 10 minutes assigned to present. Please be mindful of the time assigned. Nonetheless, as you approach the 10-minute mark, we will let you know that you have a few minutes left. We will send over a message to you. After all presentations, the chat feature will be enabled for questions and answers. For the time being, it won't be enabled, so please write down your concerns and reflections and doubts in order to share them towards the end of the presentation. Let me tell you that all summaries are posted on the Uniservitate web with the contact details of authors, so you can contact them should you wish to. And there's a space where you can find e-posters. On that space, you can generate interaction with the presenters. So this is where you will be visiting the abstracts. We would finally ask you to turn off your mics, to mute your mics, and to be quite careful because sometimes mics go off mute for some distraction or because of an involuntary mouse movement. And we would like to avoid or to stop this from happening. Be mindful of the floor of those who are presenting. Without any further ado, we'll get started with the formal presentations. Candelaria, can we see on the screen what the order of the presentations is going to be? We will get started with Javier Arranz. The title of his project is a service learning project following Ramon Llull and Saint Teresa of Calcutta. He comes from the Ramon Llull University in Spain. Good evening to you all. Thank you for the opportunity that I was given to present this experience. I take it that you can hear me well. Yes, first I should say that this experience started from a subject that we have called University Service Learning. This is for third-year students, and as I show on the slides on my presentation, this consists of two parts. Firstly, the title. The title says that our inspiration, that is the driving force, is the pattern of our university. Saint Teresa from Calcutta, we carried out the second part in the Calcutta city in India. Students have to sit for this assignment, and they work in two different ways. On the one hand, we help with the institution Hermanas de la Caridad in Barcelona. Their work is to take care of the underprivileged, to give them food and to give them clothes. So our group provides advice. We take active participation picking food, and we take active participation in putting clothes in condition, and we also take part in deliveries. Well, sometimes it depends on the situation. Of course, due to COVID, we've had very many restrictions. They get some prior background. We teach them we talk about solidarity, what poverty means, and on the other hand, students participate in a center that provides psychopedagogical care to children. In Spain, we have them, the name is UNCRAE. These are special care centers for boys and girls who have family issues, economic constraints, and they cannot find a way out. So students from psychology, from education, they get involved in programs and in the actions that are taken. For instance, in the afternoon, they have 3 hours every during 2 days. These are 6 hours every week. They go to the site and they provide advice to the professionals to take an active part in the service learning process. There is a psychological component as well. These are boys and girls at risk. So sometimes they serve the role as a therapeutic guide. They have to express or talk about the needs they have, and also educational orientation. In Spain, once children are 16, they can have access to modules that have to do with professional training. So that's some sort of orientation for the future. We do this in a 4-month period. Students go together with professors. They have to write minutes of all the things that are done. And what we do is to conduct monitoring, and we talk with those who are responsible of those agencies in order to fine tune the magnitude of this advice. If they, to find out whether they are pleased, whether we need to change anything. This is the first part. It has to do with evaluation. The service component is clear. We take action in the city of Barcelona, and we have placed it within our curriculum. Once we finish this, then we propose those students and those volunteers who want to take another second action, we suggest this initiative, but this will be done in the city of Calcutta. The logistics, well, of course, are complicated to organize. Not all the students have the necessary means to be there for a month, to travel and live there for a month, but what we do is the same thing that was done in Barcelona, but in the city of origin. If in the original part we have like 200 students participating, for the second phase to happen, well, we have 20 as the top number of students that can join us. This has to do with the infrastructure, travel and living expenses and whatnot. So in the last 10 years, we have a number of volunteers that have volunteered for this activity. They are 20, 25 tops. So we perform a selection process, and they will have to comply with a number of spiritual respites, and they also have to show how they have acted, what their scores have been like in service learning activities. They are personally interviewed. Then during weekends, they go to Christian retreats. They are mandatory. And the second part is volunteer work of what has been learned during the first phase. So they are trained on a course that is very much centered on spirituality, what it means to travel to another country, what about rules of engagement and coexistence, the proper nature of the country to be visited. So in the end, between 18 and 20, students get to travel. What we do in Calcutta is to go to the Mother House venue. I was honored and I had the privilege to work there for 2 years. And the nuns who are in charge make a selection depending on the careers. For instance, students who study physiotherapy, they go to a site, a daycare center for elderly to take care of them. Or for instance, students that study pharmacy, well, they are in charge of the dispensing room for distribution of drugs and dispensing of drugs. The second activity, when with students with education and sports, we have an agreement with the Yamuna Entity School, with whom we cooperate in Barcelona, taking care of children, and the different students engage in more practical activities with children, games, visits, day outs. So it's some sort of continuity of a project that we started in Barcelona that will end in a mother city abroad. They will be staying there for a month. They also participate in other activities, such as in celebrations, in cultural issues, or in cultural events. And in the Calcutta Jesuit school, there's a weekend organized for spiritual retreats, taking advantage that we are in the city of meditation. You are left with 2 minutes. Well, this is an experience that we have been conducting for the last 12 years, and it is growing and growing. We have lots of students who want to participate. So thank you, and I hope this has been interesting to you. Thank you, Javier, for sharing this experience where students are exposed to a number of different cultures, especially following the steps of a life testimony being so important for the for the whole world, such as Saint Teresa of Calcutta. So thank you for showing us this experience, this student's experience. I should remind to participants, if you have questions or comments, we will be sharing them on the table after all presentations have been made. So I will be asking Karina Rosa to take care of the next part. She will be the second speaker. She will talk about Global Compact on Education in Action, a quantitative research from the LAMSA University in Italy.
Thank you so much. I'm going to present actually the framework. I'm going to focus rather on some concepts of the theoretical framework of a research work that is in progress. It's a construction of indicators for the good practices from the perspective of service learning. So as part of this project of the Global Compact on Education. First, very briefly, I will give you some general framework and overview of what's going on with the Global Compact. With the message at the launch of the Global Compact on Education on September 12th, 2019, Pope Francis asked for the construction of a vast educational alliance and invited all society stakeholders to get together in the construction of a global village for education. It calls for the construction of an educational alliance to integrate the various pedagogical perspectives and the different educational actions through the construction of cooperation networks. This enterprise, says Pope Francis, will not be possible without activating these three carriages: the carriage of putting people at the center, of investing the best energy with creativity and responsibility, and the carriage of forming and training, educating people that may be at the service of society. So the service is very clear. Then five themes were identified for research in the social and educational area: dignity and human rights, peace and citizenship, technology and comprehensive ecology, fraternity and cooperation, cultures and religions, that are developed by some universities that are also building networks around these topics. Afterwards, 7 goals or journeys were defined: the centrality of the individual, the protagonism of the new generations, the promotion of women, the participation of the families, the openness and inclusion, renewing economy and politics, and protecting the common home. As a response to this call, the organizing committee of the Global Compact on Education received many experiences related to education in formal areas, that is schools and universities; informal, that is courses organized by organizations or other institutions; and also informal activities, that is activities of a practical matter that involve learning in daily life, related to those 5 topics and the 3 axes. All these experiences have a global dimension because they are either interreligious, interethnical, intercultural, and or intergenerational. Every experience carries elements of quality and innovation that are to be analyzed and disseminated. So we've started by doing a reading of the good practices to start from reality, in order to identify some pedagogical principles, to then, in a feedback process, identify educational methods in order to identify new pedagogical lines. Thanks to the diversity and variety and multiplicity of participating institutions, this educational village allows us to open to these wide horizons to discover new models of teaching. In this sense, we hypothesize that service learning is an educational proposal that acts cross-sectionally in all projects. And there you can find different models of application that in concentric circles go from local to global. That is, the other objective is to elaborate the indicators to see how service learning acts in these experiences. One of the axes refers explicitly to service, having the courage to form people that are willing to be at the service of the community. This is the words that the Pope used to urge schools to be engaged in community service projects. As indicated in Instrumentum Laboris, today the youth are the ones that are calling the whole of society to the urgency of rediscovering that spirit of service without which every small or large community runs the risk of its own extinction. The term service and everything that revolves around the topic of service is very well developed in this global movement of service learning. And therefore, the first stage is to collect what has already been developed and the existing indicators, and also those characteristics that those that are applying service learning, we know that are typical of this proposal, that it has to be concrete and useful, start from reality, respond to real needs of the community, to be demanding, to generate some kind of reciprocity. We know there are different typologies that go from direct service to dissemination activities, transfer of knowledge, process of change, etc. As a concept for service, we select the idea of a service that allows us to implement relational goods characterized by the value of gratuity, which generates some kind of reciprocity in the logic of prosocial behaviors. In this perspective, we see the category of generativity. It's a concept from sociology and anthropology that is chosen as the framework to the assessment of the global and educational alliances and to evaluate the result of the service. As Magatti defines, social generativity is a new way of thinking and of acting at a personal and collective level that narrates the possibility of a type of action that is socially oriented, creative, connected, productive, and responsible, able of having a positive impact on the forms of production, of innovation, living, caring, organizing, investing, giving them a new life. You have 2 minutes left. Social generativity has very well defined stages, that is putting the world, that is creating the world, the organizational phase, the one of releasing, that is the transitive phase. And it also implies some dimensions that trigger a movement that stays in time, that is, it's intertemporal, it's wider in space, and it extends to others. A second characteristic or category, actually, or approach that is used as a conceptual tool is the ecosystemic approach that has been used also for many years by several disciplines, that implies the idea that learning happens in a complex network formed by people and things that interact dynamically among them at different levels, creating values for all the actors in the ecosystem. And also, moving along from Brenner thinking, he offers also a conceptual framework with an ecological level that moves from a macro level to a micro level. The object of study of this research is 72 educational experiences, social, of school, of universities, and educational organizations. And the units of analysis are the service actions, actions of service to the community. The methodology for this research work is quantitative and qualitative, and it responds to a model of compared education with an interactionist approach using the comparative system at different levels of dimensions, inspired in the cube of Bray and Thomas. Adapting this cube, we use the objectives, the themes, and the three axes. So it's possible to analyze them in concentric circles from local to global, moving to and fro these levels to assess the experience. This coming and going allows the researcher to identify the continuities, differentiating the universal at a pedagogical level from the specific at a cultural level. The 10 minutes have run off. So thank you all for and invite you to join the Global Village of Education. Thank you, Karina, for showing us the specific message of Pope Francis to rediscover service. Now you've shown us this process of understanding and achieving that. So that we can discover that spirit with our students. We have to discover it through different processes. So thank you so much. And now we are going to invite Francisco Costales, the next speaker. His work is called The Pedagogical Self of the Teacher, the Symbolic Pedagogy of Byington, and the Kolvenbach Paradigm. He is the Pontifical Catholic University of Ecuador. Go ahead.
Greetings to you all. It's my honor to participate in this symposium with Uniservitate. My part is to present theory on education philosophy. I compared two teaching systems, Symbolic Byington pedagogy and the paradigm Ledesma-Kolvenbach. Let's focus on the characters. Carl Gustav Jung and Carlos Byington, who, based on the theory, considers the symbolic Jungian pedagogy. On another one, based on Ignacio de Loyola, in the 16th century, would already consider about the principles of Ignatian pedagogy that would be later picked by Peter Hans Kolvenbach, who died in 2016. How about our hypothesis? The development of psychological functions, Jungian functions, integrated on the pedagogical self of the teaching of the university teacher would correspond to the achievement of the goals of the Ledesma-Kolvenbach model. Utilitas, Justitia, Humanitas, and Fides. These are part of the university education of the Company of Jesus. So, what will our understanding be of transference according to Byington? This is directly related to the phenomenon on projection, and it consists on the exchange or combination of energies, affection or unaffection between the professor and the student. In the psychopedagogical process, there's a defensive transference and a creative one as well. The defensive one may lead to reluctance or aversion in the learning process, but the pedagogical self is especially interested in the creative transference, of which we will be discussing later. What will our understanding be of pedagogical self? It is the conscious totality of the experiences that we refer to as learning psychic reactions of the whole between students and teachers. For Jung, however, the self is the total human being considered as the goal that the development of the psychical and psychotherapeutical process aim at. In other words, for Jung, the self is the integration of all the psychological structures of the human being such as the self, the shadow, the animus and the anima, conscience and collective unconscious. So this culture were transferred in the selves or oneself is the archetype that unifies for Jung. But when we talk about the integration of pedagogical experiences, then we talk about the pedagogical self that is presented by Bacton. What about the psychological functions according to Jung? Thinking, feeling, having intuition and perception. So these functions, these psychological functions of Jung have fundamental characteristics: thought, judgment, conceptualization, defining, analyzing. Feeling is to value or appreciate, to assess pedagogical experiences or existential experiences in pleasing or unpleasant one. Then intuition is a way of conscience perception or aware perception. This we refer to as synchronicity or coincidence, and sensation is what we perceive through the five senses. Jung also talks about the fact that there's two attitudes, introversion and extroversion. The four functions, thought, feeling, intuition, and sensation, may have an out-forward flow or an insight, where we will have insightful processes. Beighton starts from three fundamental aspects in order to create the symbolic educational process. He talks about the structuring symbol, that is, any pedagogical experience. An example taken by Beighton himself. The symbol would be a Rottweiler dog, the structuring function fear, and the structuring system would be the measures that are taken in order to find a solution to the conflict between the symbol and the structuring function. The structuring symbol, the structuring function, the aesthetic. In music, we have music, rhythm on the next step, and then the structuring system would be using words, monosyllable terms, disyllabic words, in order to create a number of rhythms. Attending to classes would be a structuring symbol, and flexibility or rigidity of the professor to solve a conflict would be the structuring system. Beighton also talked about the archetypes. He talks about patriarchal society. It means that it is that it has a hierarchy, that it gives priority to the left hemisphere of the brain and its products, analysis, thinking, conceptualizing. The matriarchal archetype, however, has this sense of appreciating senses, whatever is pleasant, emotional, and bodily. And the otherness would be the marriage between the matriarchal and the patriarchal side of things. The otherness would combine the centripetal force of matriarchal and the centrifugal force of the patriarchal. The Ledesma-Kolvenbach paradigm talks about faith, humanitas, utilitas, and the other one. What about this? What about utilities? Advantages for daily practice. Justice, to take action to favor universal good. Humanitas, promoting deeply human values. And fides, the transcendental dimension of life. So my proposal to unify the psychological functions at a global scale, the pedagogical self. Once we have educated that thought, feeling, intuition, and sensation, then we could think about developing these functions, and we could then achieve the purposes considered by Ledesma and Kolbenbach. There wouldn't be justice, that is the proper administration of the public sphere and the adequate formulation of the laws, the abstract logic, the generalizing logic of the rational nature, a causal relation between thought and justice. By the same token, there wouldn't be any humanitas, human values, if we have not taken first the feeling as a function. You have 2 minutes left. The phrase by Jesus, which is utopia for us, but for him, it was a reality. Loving the others as you love yourself. There wouldn't be utilitas considering advantages for daily practice and the preparation for the competent exercise of the useful profession. But we have to find what the sensation function is, recording material reality by the senses. It is this purpose that has priority in our educational system. There is asymmetry when developing the learning process. And finally, faith, the certainty of what is expected, conviction of what cannot be seen. According to Hebrew 11:1, you require the function of intuition, the capacity to perceive past and future possibilities of things. This is a function that continues to lie in the future, to be developed in our educational system. By way of conclusion, then we can say that converting the pedagogical self into an act, in something visible, would show a teacher who, whatever he says, does, and communicates would be a reality that is integrated in their own experience. By prioritizing thought and feelings, we are procrastinating other psychological functions whose development is necessary to achieve the purposes of the Jesuit education. The living of the pedagogical self means educating for being better to serve better. So the pedagogical self is a conquest of the individual conscience, being gnosiological, being the gnosiological, a path to the ontological. Thank you, Francisco. This shows us how you have processed your reflection as a teacher in our deepest essence, at our deepest levels of conscience. We as teachers are being built as human beings, as persons every time through our pedagogical activity. Thank you so much for this contribution. Up next, we will ask Juan Garcia Gutierrez to take the floor from Spain. He will be presenting Lights and Shadows of Service Learning as a strategy to renew Catholic education, notes for a pedagogy of transcendence.
You can hear me, right? Yes, go ahead. Okay, first of all, as you can see, I've changed the title a little, perhaps. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the team at Uniservitate for the organization of this symposium that I think is an excuse to share experiences, as we've seen, and to generate a rich dialogue and the traditions and the spiritual thinking that service learning feeds on. I would like to thank you for accepting my paper because I come from a public university. I don't come from a Catholic university. And that's why I thought it was interesting to have this dialogue. The, the purpose of my reflection was to explore the idea of service as it's developed in the Christian social doctrine, the social doctrine of the church. And that reflection is done with the idea of recovering a humanistic education that will allow us to reconnect with that spiritual and transcendental dimension of human beings that sometimes we tend to forget. We can say that this concern, I mean, this educational concern has been constant throughout the social doctrine of the church. The church is a mother, is a teacher, and there's continuity. I'm going to focus rather on two aspects to two things that have been said by Pope Francis and Pope Benedict. Karina mentioned one of them when she mentioned the Global Compact on Education. I think that between Francis and Ratzinger, and between Ratzinger and Francis, we can see a pedagogical continuity that is very interesting. From the analysis and the X-ray made by Benedict XVI around the idea of educational emergency, we might move to the answer offered by Francis as the Global Compact on Education. And the intention, as Benedict XVI says, of forming solid individuals that can collaborate with the others and make sense of their own lives. We add that of forming mature people that can go beyond the fragmentation and rebuild the social pattern that are available to be at the service of the community. And these are two ways of facing the same pedagogical intention of forming the inside and the outside of the individual. This service, from the idea of responsibility, is mainly focused on promoting a new model of the human being life, social life, and the relationship with nature. So the root of this service is an evangelical root. And here we have a couple of passages from the gospel that transmit very strong words. The one that wants to be great among us will be your servant. Don't allow you to be called advisors because only Christ is the advisor. The first among you will be your servant. And I thought that in this context of the gospel developed by the social doctrine of the church, we can find a very rich content, a very rich tradition to better understand the scope of service. But besides, I think that this idea of service cannot be seen in isolation. We should understand it in the context that is promoted by the Pope in different movements like the Economy of Francesco, the Laudato Si movement, or the Global Compact on Education. I really like it because it gives me the feeling that the Pope, through these movements, is trying to flood the spirit, as Juan Crisostomo would say. This idea of flooding is a metaphor that is also adopted in the movement of the Foculars and tries to explain the fruits of the dialogue between science, culture, and revelation. And I think this idea that is launched by Francis is very interesting. And I think that in that continuity that was started by Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, between the dialogue between reason and faith, Francis moved it to this idea of flooding of the spirit. And finally, I'm going to try and share with you 4 ideas that are based on my work. Well, I'm going to do the first one here to quote Nieves Tapia in one of her books on service learning. She says that the question of language is not a minor issue, and she reminds that in Spanish, service is not automatically a synonym of solidarity. Perhaps that's why in different denominations, one is aprendizaje servicio solidario because it tries to indicate the intentionality of that service, adding the solidarity idea to it. We can say, in order to be brief, that the definitions of service show us that it's a heterogeneous reality that is not autonomous. The one that serves is not fully independent, but it depends on the others. And this is quite paradoxical because in education, we always want to promote the autonomy of the individual. However, this idea of service and this idea of heteronomy is an opportunity precisely for the learning of the human interdependence. Second, about the pedagogical intentionality, I would like to remind you some words by Benedict XVI about freedom and responsibility. He says that they are a conquest because, as opposed to what happens in the technical or economic field, where progress can be added to the past progress, in the moral growth of individuals, we don't have that possibility of accumulating because human freedom is always new. And so each person, each generation should personally make their own decisions again. Not even the greatest values of the past can be just inherited. They had to be assumed and renewed through a personal choice that sometimes or very often is very difficult. That's why Pope Francis says that we should consider these 3 languages that are so known to us in service learning: the head, the heart, and the hands, as Pestology would say. Education should move along these 3 ways: learning, teaching to think, and accompany in being. These 3 languages in harmony. From my perspective, the harmony among these 3 visions would be the soul of service learning and the guarantee of a proper integral education. Third, we can say that service learning helps us have an experience, but not just any experience. The mainly commercial approaches that understand education as a product or as an external output rather than as a process. And here the metaphor would be to think of the experience as an experience to the customer when you receive an iPhone and you open the box, that's a customer experience, or the act of generosity that you can make, that's also an experience. We move along experiences in 2 different logics. You have 2 minutes left. Okay. And the final reflection is about the notion of authority. And I'll do this in 2 minutes. I think that service is involved in the education and relationship to re-signify the symmetry and the authority. If the educational relationship has always been characterized as a relationship of help, we can say it's also a relationship of service. So the willingness to serve restores the authority to its original etymology. That is, it means increasing, growing, that also matches its pedagogical meaning as somebody that facilitates and that helps something grow and improve. So that who maintains an asymmetric relationship based on power will be served by others. And those that maintain an asymmetric relationship based on power will use the others, but those that maintain an asymmetric relationship based on authority will serve the others, will try to benefit the others. That is to find their good, not his or her own good. One is a manipulative relationship and the other is educational. So to conclude, in my final 30 seconds, adopting service as an educational intentionality helps us and forces us to move away from ourselves, both personally and collectively. So service is an open door to transcendence, a door that allows us to see education with different eyes, renewing education, and thus renew our communities and ourselves from that perspective, from that look from the others, and allows us to start all over again. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this reflection about service and how you say it's present cross-sectionally in all these global movements that Pope Francis has been promoted in recent years. And you also mentioned how the pedagogy of authority is necessary and it requires the others. But here with a specific characteristic, that is that pedagogy of authority that requires the other, and together we build different realities for the common good. So thank you so much for your contribution. Now we're going to ask Tom Kearney. He's going to present his project called, his research called Service Learning as a Path of Spirituality.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to share some of our story of Tangaza University College. We were very excited to be part of the Uniservitate project because it's been part of our history. And as we think about Tangaza, it began really as a seminary, but not a diocesan seminary. It began as a collaboration of missionary congregations, and initially to prepare their people for ministry in the ministry of priesthood. Since then, many decisions have been taken that has enabled the college to evolve into what it is now. Collaboration owned by 23 member societies and offering studies in those listed there: theology, philosophy, education, counseling, transformation, leadership and management, all of which are preparing people to work in service of the community to which they are sent. The Catholic identity of Tangaza has always been there. It began really with a realization of Tangaza Fumbula Imani, the Swahili statement of proclaim the mystery of faith. And life, death, and resurrection of Jesus is our understanding of what makes life meaningful to this community. And as we reflected more about Tangaza Fumbula Imani, it gave rise to this motto of underpinning in many ways service learning, teaching minds, touching hearts, transforming lives. The application to be part of Uniservitate project and the selection as the African hub challenged Tangaza to consciously look at what in fact it was doing and to consciously document initiatives and results, and to systematically make efforts to conscientize the whole college towards this approach. And now we began to look at, well, what is the spirituality that underpins Tangaza College? Albert Nolan, a South African Dominican, when he talks about the spirituality of Jesus, he talks about it as what is behind the experiences and attitudes that fired Jesus up and inspired him? What got him out of bed every morning? What motivated him and sustained him? And in the picture, we see the African Jesus meeting the African Samaritan woman. And the dialogue that happens between the two of them emphasizes this universality of our human nature. So it was very interesting for me to hear this morning when the quotation from the message of Pope Francis talked really about strengthening and in transforming Catholic education. And he was suggesting two things: collaboration and also developing a culture of dialogue. And I think we see some of that being acted out in our presentations this evening. and the Secretary of the United Nations talked about really an education for solidarity. So those kind of messages coming to us from Pope Francis and the Secretary General of the United Nations basically puts down for us a solid spirituality. Developing a spirituality of service learning for us meant that we had to ask ourselves these questions. What motivates us and what sustains us? And it kept bringing us back to the vision of our founding fathers, preparing ministers to transform the world. Initially, priests, and then expanding to religious sisters and brothers, and then expanding through education and social transformation classes to lay people, and even like-minded people not Catholic, who wanted to be part of becoming the best people they could be and helping to transform the world. So this was the expansion, really, and our realization of the spirituality of service learning. We were educating, helping people to capacity build themselves in order to make a difference in the world. In responding in a relevant way to the needs of the times, the range of courses expanded as ways of preparing ministers to make a difference. So we had to take some steps to develop our way of thinking. And the steps to be taken really were to answer this question: who is the God that Jesus presented to us? And Jesus presented to us a God whose nature was compassion and whose passion was for justice. And we can see these in the stories of the Good Samaritan, the story of the way Jesus dealt with the woman who was brought before him and accused of being guilty of adultery. Jesus lived this through his teaching and his healing, and he asks us to follow him. So the challenge for us at Tangaza then became one to articulate our values, formulate our courses based on these values, and to teach our students these fundamental aspects of their potential to make a difference. The next challenge for us really was to look at, are we being effective? And the way to do this really was to contact our alumni and to look at what the alumni of the college were doing. And we have listed here 6 projects that have been developed, 5 of them developed by ex-students, alumni of the college. The Mirror of Hope is developed by a graduate of social transformation who was sponsored himself to study and saw the value of that and began a school sponsorship program in his local parish. Very soon, helping and opening it up to other people, he began to realize that it wasn't just the students, there was a whole lot of problems in terms of school holidays, supporting students at non-school time, then the families, and particularly single parent families headed by mothers mostly, a need for women empowerment. So this Mirror of Hope project that Thomas started had to develop and meet social needs as he became more and more aware of them. Friends of Love Kibera Slums is a similar project based on a making available education established by a graduate of the School of Education. The Mango Tree Project is a social development project which is really coming out of, firstly, dealing with HIV positive women and mothers, and then the orphans as these mothers died, looking after the orphans. And what it has done really is develop something into schooling and supporting these children, and then now moving towards a more formal school. So these initiatives taken by alumni are really putting into practice what they've actually learned, reflected on, and said, yes, I can apply this in the community in which I live. The orphanage at Mwanza, Tanzania, really began out of almost nothing except supporting the orphans. And what has been added there by the work of the alumnus there is that she has moved towards firstly an informal school, and then moving towards formal schooling as a way of empowering these young children. The coffee enterprise in Kampala, Uganda, is really an interesting way of getting farmers to cooperate and to form a cooperative so that they can maximize their efforts to sell their products, to look at market development, and to improve the financial profitability of their businesses by forming together and forming cooperatives that can work on behalf of that. Now, all of those 5 initiatives come from the individual ex-students of Tangaza University College applying what they've learned into the society itself and staying in contact for some assistance to capacity build in that. University Matani is actually a different project altogether. It's a project that came from Huruma slums, where the parish priest and the people started to see the way out of all of this for them was further education. So through the parish in Huruma and also Tangaza College, an agreement was made to begin an outreach towards education. And it was mainly based around civic education, so that people would become more aware of development of the community and their civil rights and be able to become more empowered to deal with the business of their own. So the story of service learning in Tangaza has developed much over the 35 years. And what we've seen as the vision of the founders in collaboration, in dialogue, in opening up to the inclusion of lay people and non-Catholics, but the whole philosophy of service learning has continued to thrive in the environment. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing our story with you. And I wish you all well.
Thank you so much, Tom, for presenting such an identity from the Tangaza University, and also the questions that you try to answer as to how you've gone about it over time, so that service learning is something that is embedded in the training of students. Up next, we will ask Luisa Mota Ribeiro from Portugal, from the Catholic Portuguese University, to present Service Learning and Spirituality, an analysis of universities. Go ahead, Luisa.
Sorry, I'm waiting. It's with something. Can you hear me? No.
We can hear you.
Yeah, because everything is, freeze.
We cannot see your screen. We can hear you, but it's still.
Okay, I will stop the sharing. I don't know. The PC is doing something. I have no idea, but I will try again. Okay.
It's working. Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I will do it again. Yeah.
It just takes some minutes.
Yes. It's tired. My computer is tired. Maybe it's, I don't know. Okay.
We can see it now.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. So hello, everyone. I have the pleasure to present here a work about the purpose of life, purpose in life of a group of students. So service learning and spirituality, analysis of university students' purpose in life. This is a study that we made in the last months. In our pilot projects of service learning in our university, and we made a pre-test and a post-test with the students, and here we are presenting the results of the post-test, specifically about the purpose in life. I think, okay. So we know that spirituality is an area of education vital to human overall well-being. And it's very important to understand the interior and subjective life of university students, helping students to deal with questions about the meaning and purpose of life. We talked about this today. So this, we had quantitative data about competencies, about social and civic competencies, but this work is about the way students define purpose in life. So we apply the questionnaire after the service learning experience. We had 15 service learning pilot experiences, and there were 113 students that answered to this questionnaire, mainly female, with ages between 18 and 51, and students from graduation and from master. The question that we made to the students was, describe by your own words what you consider your life purpose is. And we have also two other questions about changes in life purpose, in what extent the students thought that their life purpose has changed with the service learning experience, and also another item about the relation between the life purpose and the service they had developed. So the analyses were made in the first item, with qualitative content analysis with NVivo. We made mainly an inductive analysis, but then we organized the categories into dimensions of major life goals, adapting from Roberts and Robbins 2000, and the other follow-up questions we made statistic analysis. I'm sorry, because I talk many Spanish today, and my brain, I think, is in Spanish and not in English. So so these are our results that we would like to share with you. So I think it's very interesting to see the categories and also the expression of that categories. For example, we see that our students writing about their purpose in life, they talk about social objectives in their life in the first place. So, for example, help or take care of others, having an impact, build a better world. So they show here pro-social behaviors and attitudes. In the second place, we can see personal growth, for example, with personal development. We will show some text. Personal success, for example, making the best of oneself. Then we have well-being, and they refer being happy, for example, being healthy, enjoy every moment of life, being present in every moment of life. And then we have a professional dimension. They told, for example, having a job, a career, professional fulfillment. So things centered on the professional dimension. Then we had relationship dimension. For example, build a family, having good relationship with the people around, making the family proud. Then we had economic objectives, having independence and financial stability, and being rich. Then we had a religious dimension, fulfill a divine purpose, or put in practice Catholic values, and a hedonistic category. And there were two students that told they couldn't say their purpose in life. We can see that students are mostly pro-social oriented in their formulations of purpose in life. For example, this student of dental medicine says that she wants to help. I want to help my family and alleviate the pain of patients in order to have a positive effect on the community. We saw also personal growth. We have here an example: improving myself with each passing day, become the best version of myself. Also, well-being is mostly referred to being happy. For example, to be happy and make the most of this short time that is this passage through planet Earth. And the professional dimension refers, for example, to the desire to be a good worker or having a job career without mentioning economic profits. That it's another dimension. Having a job I like, where I can do my best. So we have lots of others reports of our students. They are very interesting. Some of them write many lines with many words, with sentences, with much information. It's very interesting. In the quantitative results, we had these two questions: to what extent has your life purpose changed as a result of the service learning experience? We have 41% of the students saying that it changed moderately, and 29% a lot. So this is very interesting. We couldn't explore this. Maybe we could do another other studies with exploring these perceptions, because they feel their life purpose change. And 25% said little or nothing. And in the other question, to what extent is the service you perform related to your life purpose? Here we had a percentage bigger, because they told 23% very related and 32 moderately related. And maybe this is because the service is related to the area, the scientific area of the course, and they feel the relation between both. So
minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So this we would like to share with you our reflection about this, because we asked students about life in purpose, and that we can see, for example, this definition that life purpose has a desired impact during one's lifespan, not only in gains for oneself, but also in the impact on others, communities and institutions. And we could see and the literature, we could find in the literature and in also in our data, the relation between life purpose and major life goals. And we made this option to categorize our data using major life goals, and it seemed very interesting for us, but we are exploring. These are very recent data, and we are looking for another other models that can help us to understand these data. So it's very important to study this area. There's the spiritual dimension. We know that service learning as a field of research is complex and multifaceted. So it's important to use a holistic approach when studying service learning, and so studying spiritual dimensions such as life purpose can be a good contribute. So more studies are welcome that analyze how spiritual development can be fostered through service learning. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Luisa.
Thank you, Luisa. That was a very interesting study that shows the impact of service learning on the purpose in life, as you mentioned, because as we said at the beginning, and some of you also mentioned this, that spirituality allows us to generate that purpose of life, that need we have to transcend, and we can develop that spiritual dimension in our classrooms. but we need to explore this further to see how we can target this. And now we're going to ask William Purcell from the US, the University of Notre Dame, to present his work called A Pioneer in the Encounter of Service Learning and Spirituality. Go ahead, please.
Good day, everybody. Great to see all of you. And it's tough. You've been listening for an hour and a half. And so it's tough to listen that long. We still have to hear from Rosa. And so I want to make sure we all hear from her. So I'll try to be brief and get just to the couple main points. So actually, I just wanted to touch bases and bring up just Father Don McNeil, who was a pioneer in encounter in service learning and spirituality. And so why this particular paper? Because I think it's important that we remember the moral exemplars, especially the people who began this, the work that we do, especially in Catholic service learning and higher ed. So I think it's important to remember those early creators of that. And so I'm speaking on from the US Catholic history of that. So I think it's important to know also the roots of our roots, what were the things that influenced him within that, and also that the global impact on service learning's formation in the United States that often came from other places around the world. You know, in this morning's talk, it was often referred to North America and many of the pioneers, but the pioneers in North America relied on many people from around the world to get their ideas. And so making sure that that connection is not forgotten. And so two main things, just points I want to get across. And I actually put a picture of Father Don McNeil. It was done by one of our students from China that came, who actually never met Don McNeil, but was inspired by the service learning done here. And she actually drew that picture of him freehand. And it's unbelievable how perfect on that is. But two things with Don. One is that you get deeper theological reflection when you do more thorough social analysis, right? And that is because one of the things he believed is that how did you use social sciences to be in dialogue with theology, right? So that was key. The other is that using Catholic social tradition, not just Catholic social teaching or Catholic social thought, but the full Catholic social tradition, how does that, using that broader approach and not just the religious charism of his own religious order, which was Holy Cross. And so, and actually it was 50 years ago, 1971, Don actually started doing experiential education, right? So this was 50 years ago. And then in 1983, so I am actually a faculty member in the Center for Social Concerns at the University of Notre Dame. And our center is the largest service learning center in North America within a Catholic church or within a Catholic university within that. And so a couple things, again, quickly just going through that. One is that Don actually came from a very wealthy family because he was born during the Depression. His dad was the #1 radio person in the United States, a radio show. So he became very wealthy. But one of the things he did was he then went around the world because after he graduated from Notre Dame, but he encountered poverty around the world, especially in India. And so that sense of encounter and how does encounter lead you to see things in a new way. So for instance, it was important for him then to think about what are the things that affected that, especially psychologically within that? And also how do you apply CST, because he was studying, then joined Holy Cross, was at, during Vatican II, was living in Rome during that. And a couple of people influenced him. One is Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychologist. Within that, the psychological work of Viktor Frankl on existential analysis, and thinking about how do we do that. Number two was Father Henry Nouwen, the Dutch priest, came to Notre Dame, who had gone to the Menninger Institute, studied psychology. He actually pushed Don to go to do clinical pastoral education and to go to Princeton to think about how do you use psychology as a way to help formation and with theology. So the two people, Viktor Frankl and Henry Nouwen, within that. So Don comes back to Notre Dame, and then Father Ted Hesburgh, who was the president of the university, pushed Don to say, you need to think about this in a global aspect. Pushed him to go to places like Chile and to think about how do we do the formation of students and what are they doing in other places, and looking at how oppression and different elements within that. The other thing is that Father Jack Egan was a priest of Chicago, came here, and he really was one of the priests that was influenced by Father Hillenbrand, the justice movement, in the element of how do we do the social encyclicals as a way to do social analysis overall. So what Don, again, had grown up was with then the See, Judge, Act model, but he felt like then, how do you make it more sophisticated in service learning? And it would do that with the adaptation of the pastoral circle, you know, with within that with student engagement. So the two pillars that influenced the development of the pedagogy were psychology and CST, and that pastoral circle model then of insertion immersion, analysis, theological reflection, and action planning through a Catholic social tradition framework became the approach for the community-based learning seminars that he did. So what he tried to do is that Don's pastoral theological pedagogy required students to form relationships with the marginalized in the local community and invited students to reflect on their experiences then through journal writing. He felt like journal writing was important, and that in class then he would facilitate discussion to help students integrate their experiences in the community with their insights from those course readings overall within that. The other thing that Don did, which is interesting, is that he actually then used scripture as a tool of empowerment and using that in class and outside of class. And one key example with that would be the way that he used the stories of women in the Bible to lift up the voice and dignity of women in society and the church. Examples would be a woman anointing Jesus with oil in Luke 7, woman at the well, John 4, Mary Magdalene at the tomb, John 20. So he always looked at where are the people that were peripheries and how do we give people voice within that. So it's not only acting on it and using the psychological and CST, but it's making that encounter happen continually within that. So having the wide vision of Catholic social tradition, Padre Don always interweaved the global church with the local needs. He used case studies, immersion experiences for displacement, and then encounters with people impacted by local social problems as means for students to delve into social analysis. And so he's not intimidated by so that students would not be intimidated by the esoteric style of the official text of the church. So leadership models were developed, connecting global education to reading the signs of the times through local relationships. For young adults, then the living church became seen as applied Catholic social tradition through advocacy and action with regard to systemic problems. So CST, or Catholic social tradition, provided a framework of values for reflection and action, as well as a bridge language to secular partners addressing social justice. So both the church's lived and intellectual traditions could be examined, which became vital to places like the Center for Social Concerns in order to do teaching, research, and service. So that research needs to be for a common good as a way to connect the head to the heart overall. And just kind of in conclusion for my last kind of 2 minutes is that Don, people like Father Don, I think, need to be recognized as pioneer in the spirituality that they helped develop. That his development of a spirituality of encounter influenced his formation of a pedagogy that was innovative for its time and well outside the ivory tower. So whether it be Don not having a car, using a bike for the parishes wherever he went, to living in the community, not living on campus, everything was important within that. So then Catholic social tradition, integration, and service learning becomes a more sustainable framework for the formation of leaders in spiritual solidarity with Catholicism, rather than particular charism of a religious order, such as his own. So in the very last line is that theological reflection then is a vehicle that he implemented to further strengthen the integration of faith and intellect. Insight could be gained through the combination of one's faith tradition and their current experience. By having students draw upon faith, scripture, the Catholic social tradition, and the Holy Spirit, discernment for social change can take hold in their lives and their communities. And with that, thousands of students then have been impacted over the years. We have 80% of the students at Notre Dame. We have about 8,000 students will be engaged to the Center for Social Concerns through their 4 years while they're here, and then go on as alumni, as leaders. Thank you.
Gracias, Tom, por este testimonio vivo de
Thank you, Tom, for this living testimony of this priest that shows us characteristics of how we as teachers can inspire our students, and truly from this methodology of service learning, we can develop the spiritual dimension. This has been very enriching. Thank you so much for putting on the table this testimony, this specific testimony that gives us another example of the living gospel. And we will now listen to Rosa Yáñez. She is from the Catholic University of Chile, and her work is called Service Learning in the Theology course, a way that is done on the way.
Hello, I'm going to present work that we conducted at the Pontifical Catholic University in Santiago and at the Pontifical University in Valparaiso. The two teachers from Valparaiso, the two faculties, are among the audience. So greetings from Santiago and from Valparaiso. The coronavirus pandemic globally has altered us in many aspects. Considering the challenges it involves at the local level for our Catholic institutions of higher education, we have to reflect about the kind of professional we are training, their pertinence to a post-pandemic society. As educators, we believe that learning in service is a methodology that can help provide developing the profile of a post-pandemic professional. A profile that is not just a theoretical definition, but is the outline of a caring and compromised, committed professional who interacts with specific people, considering real, particular, and contextual needs. A professional who develops his spiritual dimension within the social issue. So we've thought of this professional from the perspective of theology because our work has been conducted at the theology courses. And why is that? Because we've seen that many courses use service learning as a method, as a methodology, but theology does not. So we've tried to start by making small steps. As academics in the theology area, we made the first steps in this work using the service learning methodology. We've discovered the benefits that service learning can provide in the acquisition of significant knowledge by being incorporated as a methodology of work. But in the teaching of theology, it's a newcomer. The use of the service learning methodology allows for an integral education and spiritual development. The use of the service learning methodology is not just a methodology that combines academic learning and service in a dialectical relationship. It's a method that develops in the student the competency of a structured reflection, which we think is essential. This implies a profound understanding of the community where the service is provided, and in the long term, this develops the professional development and an effective engagement with society. So it creates a relationship between society and the student and the community partner. This opens an educational space in the concrete reality that the community partner offers. In the virtuality that we've seen, the first problem to be solved is how to design a course with a methodology that constructs and is constructed in the contact with reality, with a community partner, understanding reality as coming out of the university classroom and going to the other. Another question that made us reflect was to select the competence that we will develop in this course. And the article entitled The Development of Competencies at the University Through Service Learning by Folgueiras and Martinez was very inspirational. They say, in fact, today we not just have to form good professionals, but professionals with a sound citizen formation. In other words, in our opinion, and quoting the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, it's forming students in the social friendship, understood as the encounter with the other, not to be equals, but to get to know one another in our differences and vulnerabilities of our own humanity, particularly evidenced in these 2 years of the pandemic. Having in the horizon the understanding of the social friendship, we thought we should also find in the mission of our universities something that could help us think of a service and a course. And the mission of the Pontifical Catholic University of Valparaiso says the mission of university is to cultivate science, arts, and techniques under the faith through the creation and communication of knowledge and the education of graduates and professionals with, between inverted commas, a vocation for service to society under the framework of the values of the magisterium of the church, as you have also mentioned in your presentations. Within the definition of the mission of our university, we focus our interest on the characteristic that should identify any professional trained at our university, that is service to society, that in the context of our work, we understand as a form of social friendship. So that is no longer a neutral service, but one that becomes a gift, as Abraham that receives the visitors from Mamre in the Genesis. From this criterion and considering what service learning develops as to significant learning, we also decided as part of our work to choose a cross-sectional competency as proposed in the course on religious science, where we are conducting our research. Here, the student acts ethically, illuminated by the Christian proposal in real context, with autonomy and respect to the others, looking for common good, the promotion of human rights, and the realization of the individual in a context of diversity. Service, then, and as part of our project, is what realizes the disciplinary objectives of theology and also the service objectives themselves. We divided service in 4 essential components. This concept allows us to work from the disciplinary field of theology and from the specific service provided by the students with the community partner. And some provisional results we have achieved. I'm going to go over that very quickly. The first result with the community partner. Once the community partner was contacted and the need was detected, we established a cooperation agreement with the students. And this is interesting because the students invited them to participate in a course over Zoom. And this space was important and significant because the partners realized that they were part of a larger project that includes an important educational component that made it different from volunteering. This space also allowed for the community partner to appreciate the service learning methodology as a learning methodology. So how do the students live the service? The big question that students ask on the first day is, what is it we can do? When reflecting about this question, they discovered that it's no longer what can we do or what we are told to do. Here, in our opinion, this is where we see the change that service learning produces in the teaching and the learning process in our discipline. The student has moved from a passive attitude with a certain disconnection with reality to a more active understanding and autonomous understanding of their own education and an effective understanding of social reality. 2 minutes. Create a service project is much more than organizing objectives and the materials. This is the moment where the student has the first approach to thinking of a professional work, and this professional work is a spiritual service experience. We can then say that for the student, when serving a diverse group of people, they develop communication skills and reflection that allow them to be connected to the community partner. And they discover that service is not just doing, but being with. It's a space where human closeness and the engaged work are sources of active and reciprocal learning. And for us, teachers, it's a challenge that leads us to reflect on ourselves as theology teachers and also to reflect on the meaning of our work of teaching, understood as serving others so that they are men and women able to have social friendship. Thank you. Thank you, Rosa. Thank you so much for sharing, as your colleagues also mentioned. this alterity, as you mentioned, very well in your example in this course of theology of the Pontifical Catholic University in Chile, where we see the activities with our students towards the community as an activity with the community and not for the community. So that's a big difference. So thank you so much. Well, this has been the last presentation today. We have some time if anybody has a question. Go ahead. You can write the questions in the chat, or you can turn on your microphones and just ask the question aloud. Does anybody have any question? Very well, then. Oh, there's a question here. What is the specific service that will be provided? Who are you asking that question to? That's Graciela. For the last speaker, for Rosa. Go ahead, Rosa. Well, the specific service provided, well, the student discovers that because the student meets with the community partner, they apply the SWOP evaluation, and they discover, they identify the need. Based on that, the student creates a service learning project. For instance, they're asking for an example, something that happened last year. The students were working with a group, an association, and this association had several online activities, and they realized they were working with migrants in Chile, but it was a group of law students. And the service that the students offered was to prepare like a compendium of the migration laws in Chile. That was the service they provided. And this allows also other faculty and other schools to help. For instance, they created this document, and a professor of constitutional law reviewed it to make sure it was okay. And then another one that was studying English at college made the translation. But the students are the ones that identify the service. That's why, that's the interesting part of all this. Thank you, Rosa. Another question. And in those courses, students from different careers participate, from different courses? Well, in some experiences that we've had, they do. But this year, we are just focusing on theology students. Thank you so much. And again, we thank all the speakers in this group from Ecuador, Spain, Kenya, Italy, the US, Portugal, for your contributions. You gave us specific examples of the legacy of Jesus to love one another as I have loved you. From our educational vocation, I think there's a lot we can do, and there's still a lot to do and learn. So thank you so much. And Maria Nieves Tapia, one of the dreamers that led us to what we are today, she's going to take the floor.
To thank each one of you. I'd like to thank Leticia for having perfectly well moderated this panel, Candelaria, who joined us, and to each one of you, because I truly believe that we are building together and we are learning together, and we will mutually benefit one another in this experience. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nieves. So I would like to invite participants to the different activities that will happen simultaneously tomorrow. Yes, I left on the chat the link to the website. This is where you can have access to all the information. This is the agenda of activities and access to e-posters. Be reminded that you have the possibility of commenting each one of the posters, make your contributions, and get in contact with authors. On the web, you have the summary of the panel presentations with the messages from the authors. If you want to communicate with them, you can do it that way. And please keep participating from the activities proposed, and let's keep building together and keep reflecting together on service learning, on higher education and Catholic education. Thank you so much. Have a good day or a good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Stay well.